actually sanctions, he gives authoritative permission or approval to all of Prakriti's works. Very important. And then you see there's just a semicolon there. So the sentence is continuing with another semicolon.
Mm-hmm.
And you can begin there. His silence.
Okay. His sanctioning name initials all her works. His silence is his signature to her deeds. In the execution of her drama's scheme, in her fancies of the moment and its mood, in the march of this obvious ordinary world, where all is deep and strange to the eyes that see, and nature's common forms are marvel whelps. She through her witness sight and motion of might unrolls the material of her cosmic act, her happenings that exalt and smite the soul, her force that moves, her powers that save and slay, her word that in the silence speaks to our hearts, her silence that transcends the summit word, her heights and depths to which our spirit moves, her events that weave the texture of our lives, and all by which we find or lose ourselves, things sweet and bitter, magnificent and mean, things terrible and beautiful and divine.
And that's the end of the sentence.
Yes, long
Amazing.
one.
Yes. You said events,
Uh-huh.
and I think it's events.
Events. Okay. Events.
Her an event,
Uh-huh.
not
Okay.
an event, but an event.
Event.
And
Okay.
then there was one other word where we go through each line,
Okay.
beginning with his silence. So even his silence is his signature to her deeds, with a semicolon because he wants to continue this. In the execution of her drama scheme. So now he's going to talk about all these different things that
Mm-hmm.
the Supreme Creatrix does. So, in the execution of her
Mm-hmm.
drama scheme, in the fancies of the moment and its mood, in the march of this obvious, ordinary world where all is deep and strange to the eyes that see, and nature's common forms are marvel wefts. And we'll go through all of that up to this point now.
Uh-huh.
So we see three lines beginning with the word in.
Mm.
It's very important. Every word is so important in Savitri.
Yeah.
And so in her fancies, in the execution, in the march, so all of these things have to do with the moods of the creations.
Okay.
And all is actually deep and strange to
Mm.
the eyes that see. Well, the world is not deep and strange to us who live in the ignorance.
Mm-hmm.
We we see the trees, we see the grass, we see the birds, the animals, we see other people, men, women, children, etc. And that's not so strange to us.
Mm-hmm.
But it's strange to the eyes that see because what they see is to them not real or
Oh.
illusory,
Mm.
as the Buddhists would say. Everything here is an illusion.
Mm.
But if one rises above the spiritual range of consciousness, we actually see that everything is correct and everything is as it should be. So you see, it's arising from the ignorant planes of body, life, and mind, going into the spiritual planes of higher, illumined, intuitive, and overmind that
Mm.
see everything differently. They are the eyes that see. But when we go into the supermind, we will see that everything is exactly as it should be. And we can't understand that when we see the wars and we see torture and all these negative things in the world, killing. So
Mm.
where all is deep and strange to the eyes that see.
Okay.
And nature's common forms are marvel wefts. Well, we know what a weft is. We have when they work on these big looms and they create tapestries or
Mhm.
carpets, we have the weft and the woof,
Mhm.
two different directions of the thread. So
Okay.
it's really a marvel, an astonishing admiration marvel weft. And
Mm.
Sri Aurobindo uses it, and he uses marvel fraught, marvel house, marvel moon, and marvel
Mm.
wefts. Interesting. Four
Okay.
times he uses the word marvel with a hyphenation for the next word. Now,
Okay.
he here is back to the creatrix through the Purushas, witness sight
Mhm.
and motion of mind, unrolls the material of her cosmic act. And it's an infinite act. Her
Mhm.
happenings that exalt and smite the soul. Well, the word smite is the past tense of smote,
Okay.
uh, which means to inflict a heavy blow on something, as if with a
Mhm.
hand or a weapon. So her
Mhm.
happenings that often exalt, that means elevate or raise in rank the
Mhm.
soul, they also smite the soul.
Mm.
Because that's the only way sometimes we can get out of our, what shall I say, almost depressive or or uh, tamasic nature.
Okay.
So sometimes we have to be shaken up,
Mm.
and that's what the divine creatrix does. She
Mm.
exalts and she smites the soul. Then he
Mm.
continues, her force that moves, her powers that save and slay. Well, we have to understand that in the terms of creation, that nature is always slaying something to bring forth something better.
Okay. Yeah.
So, and we've talked about that before. We've
Mhm.
talked about the dinosaurs that she formed and
Mhm.
allowed to stay for, or one that doesn't know how many centuries. And then when they used up their purpose,
Mhm.
she slayed them and she brought forth man.
Mhm.
So now her word, and he capitalizes word again,
Mhm.
which is
Yeah.
the sound expression of the idea. Her word that in the silence speaks to our hearts. So the word only speaks to our hearts truly when there's silence. When the mind is too active and busy, the mother doesn't speak to us. She
Okay.
doesn't give us she doesn't give us the word. And that word is so important because Sri Aurobindo has so much to say about it. He says, in one point, it is out of this silence that the word which creates the worlds forever proceeds. For the word expresses that which is self hidden in the silence. And that's from the life divine.
Okay.
Now he's going to take us even higher and tell us that her silence that transcends the summit word. The summit is the highest word, but the divine creature's silence even transcends the summit word. Then her heights and depths to which our spirit moves, her events that weave the texture of our lives, and all by which we find or lose ourselves. And then these two extraordinary lines,
Yeah.
beginning with the word things.
Mhm.
Things sweet and bitter, magnificent and mean, things terrible and beautiful and divine. Well, this is so critical, isn't it?
Yes.
Our spirit moves to these different heights, but it also moves to the depths. And
Mhm.
that's why he says, her heights and depths to which our spirit moves. And then her events, the events of the creatrix that weave, and then we go back to that marvel weft that weave the texture of our lives, and all by which we find or lose ourselves. And how many lose themselves when they accept the falsehood's way. They may accept it through greed, through power,
Mm.
through falsehood itself, through lust, through all these things. They lose themselves. And then he's going to explain what they are. They are things sweet and bitter. Look at the opposition here.
Mm.
Magnificent and mean. Things terrible and beautiful and divine. So 18 lines, but so important for us in our
Right.
life.
Thank
So
you, Narad sir. Every word made a different sense now to me. So it's like Narad sir, the creatrix trying to bring out a transformation within the psychic being through all different attempts.
she is trying to raise the consciousness of this human animal.
Mm.
And in that attempt to raise that consciousness, what
Mhm.
she is doing is creating failure so
Mm.
we can have success.
Right.
She is creating all these things, but there's nothing truly negative in her creation. It's just that she puts stumbling blocks in front of us so we can
Mm.
leap over them.
Right. Right.
So
Challenges given periodically to raise you higher. Yeah.
almost, almost daily, I would say. Almost daily. Okay, please
Okay.
continue on.
Sure. Sure. Her empire in the cosmos she has built is governed by her subtle and mighty laws. His consciousness is a babe upon her knees, his being a field of vast experiment. Her endless space is the playground of his thoughts. She binds to knowledge of the shapes of time and the creative error of limiting mind, and chance that wears the rigid face of fate, and her sport of death and pain and nescience is changed and struggling in mortality.
Another fairly long line,
Hmm.
not as much as the other one, but 10 lines. So nature has built her empire
Mhm.
in this cosmos. The cosmos here is not the cosmic vastness that Sri Aurobindo mentions usually, but it's this creation,
Mhm.
our empire in the cosmos she has built.
Mhm.
And now he speaks of the Purusha, the Purushottama actually. He is governed by her subtle and mighty laws, full stop,
Mhm.
because Sri Aurobindo wants us to know that Prakriti has built her empire here.
Okay.
But but the Purusha accepts actually to be governed to be governed by her subtle and mighty laws. Therefore, his consciousness is a babe upon her knees. The
Mhm.
consciousness of the divine is a
Mhm.
babe upon Prakriti's knees. His being, his whole being, is a field of her vast experiment. And we have to understand here that, as best we can, that the divine has created this world as a game
Mhm.
with this Prakriti. And in creating this world, he has done it so that he can see many, many more aspects of himself.
Mhm.
And that's the play or the game that is always spoken about. Her endless space is the playground of his thoughts. So he's not creating, but
Mhm.
the playground of his thoughts is her endless space. Now, this interesting line, she binds to knowledge of the shapes of time. What does she bind to knowledge of that? And the creative error of limiting mind and chance that wears the rigid face of fate, and her sport of death and pain and nescience, his changed and struggling immortality. Now, we have to read this in a certain way because it's a little complex.
Yeah. Mhm. Mhm.
When she binds, it
Mhm.
means she is binding something to knowledge of the shapes of time.
Mhm.
She's she's binding it, she's putting it together, holding it together. And what
Mhm.
are those things that she is holding together? But he says first, and the creative error of limiting mind. Well, that's certainly us.
Mhm.
We do have creativity in our mind,
Mhm.
but usually, most of the times, it's erroneous
Mhm.
because our mind is so limited.
Mhm.
And so, when we think we have a great idea, even that is not our idea because it's in universal nature and it comes to us as an idea that we accept as ours.
Mhm.
So the creative error of limiting mind, and then this very, very profound line, and chance that wears the rigid face of fate. Well, we see that chance
Mhm.
is not actually fate.
Mhm.
Chance would be something Sri Aurobindo says does not exist in this world. But
Oh,
here is but here he's showing us that chance wears this rigid face of fate. And it also wears her sport of death and pain and nescience. And nescience, Sri Aurobindo clearly explains to us in two lines, actually one line. Nescience in nature is the complete self ignorance. So she's binding all these things together,
Mhm.
just to knowledge of the shapes of time. She's binding this creative era of limiting mind. She's binding this chance that wears the rigid face of fate. And also, she's binding her sport of death and pain and nescience. And what is all this about? She's binding his changed and struggling immortality.
Oh,
Now we got it. You see,
yeah.
so the Lord has taken human birth
Mm.
and he's changed himself.
Okay.
In his transcendent sphere, he's all
Mm.
perfect, immutable, untouchable,
Mm.
eternal. So he is changed now because he's taken this human birth, and
Mm.
nature or Prakriti is working here on the earth
Mhm.
with his and our struggling immortality.
Mm.
And so we'll read four more lines and then you can read the whole thing.
Sure. Narad sir, one question I have here.
Sure.
So, why does it say her sport of death? Is there like a more deeper meaning to it because of
Well,
the usage of
yeah,
word sport?
yes, there is. Because if we understand death properly,
Mm-hmm.
it's not this horrible face that we are afraid of. But when we are no longer able to progress in
Mm-hmm.
our mind or in our heart or sometimes in our body, death comes to free us from
Okay.
that limitation so that we can go into our place of rest
Mm.
for however long. They say it's usually only 2 years, and we
Mm.
take a new birth.
Okay.
So we have to see death, as Sri Aurobindo tells us, just as one would change one's clothing going into a
Mm.
different climate.
Okay.
So this sport of death, the sport here is a little humorous, yes.
Mm-hmm.
So
Okay.
now you can read the last four lines or five lines.
Sure. Yeah. His soul is a subtle atom in a mass, his substance a material for her works. Her spirit survives amid the death of things. He climbs to eternity, to being's gaps. He's carried by her from night to deathless light.
So this is the transformation, the
Hmm.
evolution, we might say, the
Hmm.
evolution. And now even the divine soul is a
Mhm.
subtle atom in a mass. And his substance, look at all the words his
Yes.
and he, four his
Mhm.
in a row, and two he.
Mhm,
So his soul is this subtle atom in a mass. His
mhm,
substance is a material for her works, the creatures.
mhm,
His spirit survives amid the death of things, and all our spirits survive amid the death of things, even our
mhm,
own.
mhm,
He climbs to eternity through being's gaps. Now, that's a difficult line for me because
mhm,
obviously he's evolving, and
mhm,
there have to be these gaps, and we can say that they may occur in certain moments. There's a beautiful thing in the hour of God where he tells us that sometimes the force is so powerful that things are done in seconds or minutes that would normally take years to do.
wow.
And at other times, it's just the opposite. Years
Mhm,
and years and years of hard work for one small progress.
mhm, mhm,
So his substance is a material for her works. His spirit survives amid the death of things. He climbs to eternity through being's gaps. He is carried by her. He is carried by her
mhm.
from night to deathless light. So please read the whole thing.
Sure. Going back to page 63, last line. His
Yes.
sanctioning name initials all her works. His silence is his signature to her deeds. In the execution of her drama scheme, in her fancies of the moment and its mood, in the march of this obvious ordinary world, where all is deep and strange to the eyes that see, and the nature's common forms are marvel webs.
No the, just and natures.
And nature's common forms are marvel webs. She through his witness sight and motion of might unrolls the material of her cosmic act, her happenings that exalt and smite the soul, her force that moves, her powers that save and slay, her word that in the silence speaks to our hearts, her heights and depths to which our spirit moves.
Uh, no, her silence that transcends the
Oh,
summit.
sorry, I missed the lines. Okay. Her silence that transcends the summit word, her heights and depths to which our spirits moves, her events that weave the texture of our lives, and all by which we find or lose ourselves, things sweet and better, magnificent and mean, things terrible and beautiful and divine. Her empire in the cosmos she has built is
Empire, empire, that was the word. Not
okay,
empire, but empire.
okay. Her empire in the cosmos she has built is governed by her subtle and mighty laws. His consciousness is a babe upon her knees, his being a field of her vast experiment. Her endless space is the playground of his thoughts. She binds to knowledge of the shapes of time and the creative error of limiting mind and chance that wears the rigid face of fate, and her sport of death and pain and nescience is changed and struggling immortality. His soul is a subtle atom in a mass, his substance a material for her works. His spirit survives amidst the depth of things. He climbs to eternity through being's gaps. He is carried by her from night to deathless light.
Very good. Very good.
Thank you.
So,
Thank you, Narad. It's
see you next week.
yeah, thanks. Again, you gave me all the deeper meaning, so it all comes together very nicely. Thank you so
It's
much.